You're listening to the Jacob Media Sports Network in partnership with AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Subscribe to the Jacob Media channel on YouTube for access to all daily sports content.
Back on the program, South Jersey, AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, extending the play. Johnny Mack here with Rich Q. And obviously, big playoff weekend in the NFL with the divisional round. And this is when we really get down to the nitty-gritty as far as the really, really good football team. So we'll be talking about that later. But right now, we got to talk about the Eagles coaching search. And you know, one guy who's been in on it on the ground floor, he was the one that broke the story on Lincoln Riley and the fact that the Eagles first contacted him. My buddy Ed Kracz from Sports Illustrated, the SI Eagle Maven. Welcome back to the program, Ed Kracz.
Hey, Johnny Mack. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, Ed, you know, I think, you know, the latest name we talk about in this search came out this morning, being Brandon Staley. And I think we're starting to get sort of the template of what the Eagles are, you know, maybe looking for, but also I think they almost have to settle for because of how things went off the rails with Doug Peterson. And that's sort of Doug circa 2016. First-time coach, maybe skipping steps, so to speak, who can't demand a lot of power. How do you see this search? The early days, we know the 5 interviews so far, latest Gerard Mayo, Deuce Staley on Friday. How do you see this search shaping up thus far?
Well, they seem to be casting a pretty wide net of candidates here from many different backgrounds. You know, it's kind of surprising to see this many defensive-minded coaches being interviewed. Guys like Robert Saleh, and now, you know, today Brandon Staley for the Rams is being mentioned. You know, Staley's the coach of the number 1 defense in the NFL, but he's got pretty good personnel on that side of the ball too to kind of, you know, make a charge to being number 1 in the NFL in defense. So, you know, we've seen the defensive guys. Gerard Mayo was kind of an outside-the-box type of interview. The linebackers coach in New England. Not sure that was necessarily for the head coaching position. The Eagles could be interviewing some of these candidates, too, to look at them as possible defensive or offensive coordinators. I thought the interview with Joe Brady was interesting on Wednesday. 31-year-old, really has only been in the NFL the 1 season last year in Carolina, but let him get out of the building without any contract, and who knows what's going to happen with Brady. He may end up going back to Carolina, but it's been an interesting search in that they've really looked far and wide across the NFL, and even with Lincoln Riley. I think Lincoln Riley was their number 1 choice. He may still be their number 1 choice. But now it's going to be up to Riley to see if he's going to want to leave Oklahoma for Philadelphia.
Yeah, and you know, you talk about Lincoln Riley and the fact that that is a guy, and people have mentioned Matt Rule in the setup with Carolina. He got such a not only the contract, not only the length and the money, but also the autonomy and the power that Matt Rule was able to get from Carolina. I think that's the only scenario that Lincoln Riley would leave Oklahoma for. So is that even – can Jeffrey Lurie even do that after he's coming off a Super Bowl winning coach? Like, how could you even begin to think about giving up that kind of power to an unproven commodity when you had a proven commodity and essentially fired him because you wouldn't let him have the coaches he wanted? Can you even do that?
Well, he did it with Chip Kelly. You know, he did give Chip Kelly full run in 2015, but that was after Chip had been in town for 2 years. You know, maybe you could say something like that with Lincoln is, you know, you come in your first year and, you know, we'll put in your contract, you know, you can have your powers increased. I don't know if he would do that either, or you know, if it would be a handshake deal where, you know, Lincoln would develop more and more autonomy. the deeper he got into the NFL waters. But coming out of the gate, I don't think he'll bend over for Lincoln Riley to have that kind of power right out of the gate. And, listen, and Doug didn't really want that power over personnel and all that. He just wanted to be a coach. And, it's difficult to do both in the NFL, coach and, do the personnel stuff. We saw it happen with Bill O'Brien in Houston. He didn't quite figure it out. And, Andy Reid even has a personnel guy, but he has a big say in personnel. But it's not easy to do. And to have someone coming in from college to all of a sudden understand what the NFL is all about, I just don't see Jeffrey going there.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. We're talking to my buddy Ed Kracz from SI, Eagle Maven. You can read his stuff at SI.com/NFL/Eagles. Follow him on Twitter at Kracz, Kratze. Always difficult. I always yell at Ed for that. Got to make it easier. Got to make it easier for the people. But, you bring up a good point in the fact that when I look at this coaching search as a whole, and I look at Jeffrey Lurie, he seems to have put himself in boxes to me. In other words, it would be difficult for him to hire a Lincoln Riley and give him autonomy. Now we have this other situation with Deuce Staley. Everybody and their mother involved with this organization is coming out in support of Deuce Staley. From Brandon Graham yesterday, earlier it was Rodney McLeod. So many of the running backs, Miles Sanders, that makes sense. But also people who aren't even here anymore, more like Malcolm Jenkins, Chris Long, very high-profile endorsement, for lack of a better term, with Deuce Staley. But, one of the reasons Jeffrey Lurie fired Doug Peterson, Ed, was because he wanted to go outside the organization for these new ideas, these new schemes that are so innovative. Can he do a 180 there and then say, oh, guess what? We're going to elevate Deuce Staley, same old guy in the building. In other words, Why does he put up these boxes for himself, these fences? He sort of fences himself in.
Yeah, but I think he can easily, climb out from those boxes and go a different direction. Should it work out that way? Should he hire Deuce? He could always kind of rationalize away why he did it. And you're right. I mean, Deuce is the popular in-house candidate, the only in-house candidate. And, if you're Jeffrey Lurie, I think he said one of his number one things he's going to look at is leadership. And, Deuce certainly brings that. They know he brings that. He's been with the organization for 10 years now. This was his fourth interview. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what more they need to know about Deuce Staley that they don't know already. I mean, they interviewed him in 2016 to be the head coach, and they went with Doug. They interviewed him to be the offensive coordinator in 2018 and 2020, and he didn't get those jobs. So, if Deuce doesn't get this job, I'm not sure he's going to be sticking around this organization. But he would certainly be a terrific head coach candidate, in my opinion. And then you could kind of make him the CEO, so to speak, of the roster, of the team, basically, while you would then bring in an offensive coordinator, maybe from outside the organization, definitely from outside the organization, because there's nobody in-house that they would go with. They're not going to go with Press Taylor. So, they bring in someone from the outside to be both the OC and the DC, and Deuce would just kind of be that leader in the building, instilling his culture and being the leader that everybody thinks that he is and knows that he is. So that would be the only way I could see them making it work with Deuce.
Yeah, ultimately, you bring up a good point. I mean, Jeffrey's the owner of this team. He can essentially do anything he wants and contradict himself. He did it 18 times in the same press conference. So I suppose it's not going to be that difficult for him to do if he goes a different path when it comes to choosing a coach. After the break, I want to get to your thoughts on where this search is going to settle on and who the Eagles are going to focus on to be the head coach of this team. But before it, I do want to get to your thoughts on the fact that another nugget broke this morning from Tom Pelissero of NFL Media, and that's that Doug Peterson may talk to the Seattle Seahawks about being the offensive coordinator there. The kick there is, if people don't know, Doug is originally from Bellingham, Washington. That's his home. When he did retire, if he stayed here for 20 years, he was always going back to Seattle, the Seattle area, to retire. So this could be the one offensive coordinator job Doug would consider. And could you imagine how good Doug Peterson might look with Russell Wilson? That was the dream back in that draft when Doug was the quarterback coach here.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's why Seattle has just kind of been a winning organization for a very long time. Is, they reach out to a guy they know is from the area, who is a pass-first play caller that would mix well with Russell Wilson. And it would certainly be intriguing for Doug to return home and to coach Russell Wilson after the Eagles didn't draft him back in 2013 when they ended up taking Nick Foles. So, it's certainly something I think Doug would consider. I'm not sure Doug is really that big of an ego guy either to say, oh, well, I used to be a head coach and I'm not going to stoop to being an offensive coordinator now. But that could be just a nice role for him. He wouldn't have to deal too much with the media, except for the once-a-week meetings that the coordinators have. But he wouldn't be kind of in the spotlight as the head coach. And maybe that's kind of what Doug would want to do at this stage. After a very, very long and tough year with the Eagles and all the scrutiny that he came under. And this might be, a nice little arrangement for him.
Well, Ned, I'll add to it. Pete Carroll is unbelievably 69 years old. I just locked it down. I mean, he looks like he's 45, but he is 69 years old, and he could have that easy succession plan as well. I think the whole thing shapes up to me as a perfect fit, unless Doug wants to say, hey, you know what? I got 2 years left on my contract. The guy who fired me's got to pay me if I sit at home.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what everybody just thought would happen and probably could still happen, obviously. But this might be a pretty sweet opportunity. And then, like you said, Pete Carroll's 69 years old. If Doug goes up to Seattle and, this offense starts putting up eye-popping numbers with him as the offensive coordinator, who's to say, he doesn't get elevated to take over for Pete Carroll in 2 or 3 years. I mean, there's a lot of reasons he could go there, more than just going to maybe Houston to be a head coach. I mean, I know Pelissero also reported that he might have some other developing options, but really the only two openings that I think would still be out there are the Chargers and Houston. And listen, you're going into a terrific situation with quarterbacks there as well. But again, you're going to become the head coach. You're going to be the man in the spotlight again. And I don't know if Doug's going to be quite ready for that.
All right, Ed. And now we're going to shift back after the break to the Eagles and their coaching search. So I want to get you ready for that. We want to target who the Eagles are interested in and which way they're going to go. More extending the play with Ed Kracz here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Are you looking for a place to track your action, purchase picks, and share your sports betting analysis with the gambling community? Check out Book It Sports, a social media platform with an unparalleled experience catered for the sports betting community. On the Book It Sports app, you can track all your NFL, NBA, and college basketball picks while getting real-time updates and injury reports all in one convenient place. Start building your following today and stand out amongst your friends by downloading the Book It Sports app on the Apple and Google Play stores. Let's cash some tickets and put it on Book It.
Score and save this football season on your car insurance. Before the next game, save up to 40% on your auto insurance policy. That's right, 40% savings. Call an audible this season and contact the Del Val Insurance Group. They're an advocate for you, not an insurance company. That means they'll get you the right coverage and save you up to 40%. Call managing partners Fran or Jim of Del Val Insurance, 215-354-0122, or score and save at dvigi.com. dvigi.com. A personal injury case can change every aspect of your life forever. Don't walk alone. Fritz and Bianculli get the results you deserve. Call Brian at 215-458-2222. 215-458-2222.
You're listening to the Jacob Media Sports Network in partnership with AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Subscribe to the Jacob Media channel on YouTube for access to all daily sports content.
Back on the air, AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, extending the play. Johnny Mack and Rich Q talking the Eagles coaching search with our buddy Ed Kracz from Sports Illustrated. Want to bring Ed back on the program. You can read his stuff at SI.com/NFL/Eagles. Follow him on Twitter at KRACZE. Did I get that right, Ed?
You got that right, John. Congratulations. Do you have that written down in front of you?
No,
maybe?
I don't. That's the sad part. And I always got to catch myself. Am I spelling this correctly? Which I think it should be, But Ed Kracz is Ed Kracz. It's a difficult name to say, but it's not a difficult person to read and not a difficult person to listen to when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles, because nobody does a better job covering this football team than Ed. As I mentioned, he was the one who broke the story that Howie Roseman's first call after they fired Doug Peterson was to Lincoln Riley, the head coach of the Oklahoma Sooners. And I want to get back into this coaching search, Ed, because now that we're deep into it, and obviously the Eagles are casting a wide net, we've seen some of the interviews. We mentioned him. Joe Brady ended up being first. Then you sort of had the hot candidates, which I think was more PR than anything else. Robert Saleh had options. He was never coming to the Eagles. Arthur Smith had options. He was never coming to the Eagles, but they were able to get interviews. Then you have Gerard Mayo, Deuce Staley yesterday, and now we've had the rumors of requests for people like Brandon Staley, Todd Bowles. Everyone assumes the request is coming from Mike Kafka if and whenever the Kansas City Chiefs lose in the postseason, and on and on and on we go. So I think I kind of know personally, but let's let the listeners know how you see this whole thing shaping out, developing, and what you think the Eagles' plan is. Because let's be honest, they have a target.
Yeah, and you're right. They have a target, and I think initially and maybe still that target is Lincoln Riley. Again, they would really like to have him come and be that quarterback whisperer that he was down there at Oklahoma with Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray and even Jalen Hurts. But that to me would be kind of a very long shot at this point because it takes two to tango, and I'm not sure Lincoln's ready to start dancing yet with the NFL. So realistically, to me, the target would be Mike Kafka. With the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that's who they want. He was somebody that they wanted to talk about last year to be their offensive coordinator, but Andy Reid blocked that interview. So I know they like him. Obviously, they drafted him. He went to Northwestern. He was taken in the fourth round back in 2010 by the Eagles. Very smart quarterback, very smart individual. Skill set wise, didn't really have the type of skill set to succeed long term in the NFL. But he went to Kansas City as a quarterback coach, and he's worked closely with Patrick Mahomes. And this year, he was given the added title of passing game coordinator. And this Chiefs passing game is number one in the NFL. Of course, Mahomes has a lot to do with that. And you could say, well, maybe Kafka had a hand in developing Mahomes. Mahomes was a transcendent talent coming into the league, even though he didn't get taken until the 10th pick. The skill set was there, but, Kafka didn't screw it up. He got the most out of Mahomes, or helped Mahomes get the most out of his skill set, so that's a plus. He's 33 years old, little on the young side, very new to the coaching business, but I think he is the guy that the Eagles want. I just think that they know him well. He's from the Andy Reid tree, which for some reason the Eagles can't get out from underneath the shade of that tree. They went with Peterson in 2016. It was kind of an underwhelming pick, but look what happened with Peterson. He won that Super Bowl in 2017, got the team to the playoffs the next 2 years. So I don't see them straying from that tree again. I mean, I know Brian Daboll is still out there with the Bills. They're still playing, so they couldn't talk to him. until their season's over. But I just think that Andy Reid tree is too strong for them to ignore. And I think they'll go with Mike Kafka as their target if Lincoln Riley decides he doesn't want to come.
Well, Ed, you bring up a good point with this Andy Reid tree, and I want to pick your brain about that because I got a lot of pushback on Twitter with that. When I brought up the Andy Reid coaching tree, what is it with people in Philadelphia and Andy Reid? They can't I mean, it's by far the best tree of the generation, by far. I mean, you look at the AFC side of the playoffs, who's there? It's John Harbaugh. It's Sean McDermott. It's Andy Reid himself. Even Kevin Stefanski started here as an intern back in Lehigh. And Brad Childress, before Brad Childress, another part of the Andy Reid coaching tree, went out to Minnesota and eventually made an NFC championship game. Why the heck is it a problem going to Andy Reid and asking for advice when it comes to rising potential head coaches in this league?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't see an issue with it. I think, the Andy Reid tree is solid. And if you've spent 14 years with an organization like Andy Reid did with the Eagles and, developed that relationship with the owner, Jeffrey Lurie, I mean, why wouldn't you tap into that if you can? And, you could say Eric Bieniemy is also on that tree, but I don't think the Eagles would go with Bieniemy at this point. Because I don't think you could really look at Bieniemy as being any better than Deuce Staley or any different than Deuce Staley as far as candidacy goes. But yeah, that tree is solid. I don't understand. Now, maybe Mike Kafka comes in and it takes him a little while to kind of learn the nuances of being a head coach and running his own program because he is relatively young. But, if you have Andy Reid on your speed dial and you have anything that you need counsel on or advice or guidance, you could just call Andy and ask him. And, Andy's the kind of guy that would help you, for the rest of your life. So I don't understand that. I mean, he's a guy that was a resource in the building for so many years and continues to be a resource. And why not tap into that resource if you are still on good terms with it, which the Eagles and Andy clearly are.
Exactly. Why not? We're talking with Ed Kracz on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, extending the play. Ed, before I get in, and I'm going to put this in your head so you can think about it, your home run pick, your target, which you kind of just alluded to in Mike Kafka, but also your safety net. But one more thing before we get there, and that's the theme of this coaching search. And if you take out Sal and Smith, as I said, I think they were the PR sort of interviews because they were the hot guys of the cycle. You start looking at Joe Brady, who's 31, Gerard Mayo, who's 34, I believe, and has been coaching for 2 years. You look at Mike Kafka, as we just mentioned, is 33, I believe, and then you talk about Brandon Staley. He's young. He's in his early 30s. The theme seems to be young. Does that have more to do with this constant Jeffrey Lurie push for innovation, or is it more that these guys would accept an overbearing owner and an overbearing general manager? Or is it a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above, to be honest. You're bringing in a guy who's just going to be kind of finding his coaching chops, someone who's never been a head coach before, with this search, and guys that are just happy to be head coaches and are going to do everything they can and get as much help as they can from within the organization to succeed. So, yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And, as far as the youth goes, yeah, it's innovative, but I think you're also looking at an Eagles roster in 2021 that's going to look, at least it should look, a lot younger than we've seen in previous years. There's only a handful of guys now in their 30s, and obviously Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey are two. They're most likely not returning, and unless there's a big restructure with their contracts. And Fletcher Cox, I know, is 30, and Lane Johnson is 30. But you're looking at a roster that's going to be fairly young when you consider that they have 10 guys, or I guess 9 now after Casey Tuhill left, but 9 guys left from their draft class last year that I think are going to play bigger roles. You're going to have 7 picks right now in this 2021 draft, and you're probably going to end up with maybe 10 after some comp picks, and maybe more if you trade someone like Zach Ertz and pick up a pick. So you're going to have a very youthful turnover on this roster, and maybe they want a head coach that has that kind of youth on his side to grow with this roster, a new coach to grow with a young roster, and that could be something that is what they're looking at as well.
That's an interesting point, Ed. Okay, before I let you go, let's hear how you think this is going to unfold. I want sort of like the Urban Meyer was for Jacksonville, the guy who could bust some trends for the way Jeffrey Lurie has been behaving, so to speak. The target, I think you're on record already with Mike Kafka, and then maybe the safety net if they're not able to get what they want.
Yeah, well, I think the home run, obviously, is Lincoln Riley. I think they would take him in a heartbeat if he were willing to come on board and kind of, build his way into being trustworthy as far as earning autonomy goes, over the next couple of years, kind of like Chip Kelly did. So that would be the home run. I think that Joe Brady name is kind of an interesting one. I know he doesn't really fit from any tree like the Andy Reid tree. But I think he's an interesting candidate to keep an eye on. And, maybe he could be the safety net. You could say Deuce Staley would be sort of that safety net pick, but I think Joe Brady's an intriguing name to keep an eye on. He did a pretty good job in Carolina, even though their offense, I don't think, really lit it up, but he had 2 receivers go over 1,000 yards this year. He did it without Christian McCaffrey. You're sitting there as a former LSU guy with Jamar Chase in the draft, the receiver from LSU who he helped coach to the Bolitnikoff Award for the best receiver in college 2 years ago. That would be kind of a tantalizing thing to think about with Brady coming in as the head coach, and then you draft Jamar Chase with the 6th overall pick, and then you just let it fly from there.
Seems simple. Maybe the Eagles should call Ed Kracz. You should read, Ed. SI.com/NFL/Eagles. Nobody does a better job covering this team. Nobody has done a better job covering this coaching search. So make sure you check out Ed's work there, as well as my own, by the way.
Absolutely.
And after the break, Rich Q and I are going to go through divisional weekend games here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.